Here we go. Hey, welcome back. You did not miss the quiz. I did not. I forgot to. I did. I was going to email it out yesterday, and I forgot all about it. My bad. Sorry. And so I'll hand you this. I actually took the quiz I was going to give you, and kind of backed it off a little bit. So I know my loss, your gain. But anyway, you'll take this home with you and just bring it back to services Thursday or Sunday. But anyway, it's here, and I'll make sure y'all get one before we leave tonight. But lecture 9 and 10 this evening, and we're going to be over the book of Ezekiel. We started with Ezekiel last week, just a really brief introduction, and so I beg your pardon. Excuse me. Really brief introduction last week with Ezekiel, and so we're going to be picking that up. I'm not sure, actually, I'm not sure exactly how many pages I gave you last week on Ezekiel, and I know the copies are horrible. I know I did the cleaning thing. We got 6, 7, and 8. What's 8 look like? 10 pages on Ezekiel. That's a Daniel, and okay. Daniel, the temple, page number 7. Oh, cool beans. All right. Yeah. Page number 8. Let's go to page number 8. We're going to fast forward all the way to page number 8. And a couple of things I'm going to talk about tonight in the book of Ezekiel. The book of Ezekiel, of course, Ezekiel was taken out. Do you remember the little graph we had last week? With our 6 balloons. So hopefully you took really good notes on that, because it's a strong possibility that you'll see something very similar to this in the really near future. Is that a hint? Anyway, so we know that during the first time, of course, during the Babylonian captivity, the first removal, Daniel went out. The second removal, Ezekiel goes out. Daniel ends up in a palace. Ezekiel ends up in a prison camp. The best way I know how to describe it, it's one of the cities that were along the Chebar River, and that Chebar was a canal being dug between the Tigris and the Euphrates. That was for navigational purposes and also moving product and things like that. But it was slave labor, and so the city that Ezekiel was in was a city that the Babylonians had put together for the purpose of holding prisoners that were doing the work along that canal. And so that's where Ezekiel was at. And so during this period of time, of course, Ezekiel's in captivity. And I do want to remind you that, these we're talking about the major prophets, of course. Jeremiah is still doing his thing. He's preaching during this whole period of time. So he's warning the children of Israel about the Babylonians. The Babylonians are coming in. Ezekiel is in captivity. Daniel's in captivity. Jeremiah is preaching. And so that's all going on at the same time. So this period of time is very active as far as as far as the major prophets go. And so this all happened. The Babylonians are taking place. Now, Ezekiel's in captivity. And he begins to see visions. We're not necessarily going to deal with all his visions. Of course, the classic one is in chapter 1, where you get the wheel in the middle of the wheel, and you get the 4 beasts, and people think it's a UFO or something. Great explanation, but I think a little bit far-fetched. I'm not a UFO kind of person. If you've ever read, what's the name of that book? It came out in the early 70s. I probably have a copy of it somewhere. It's not in my heresy box, but it's a book about the biblical accounts of the things that appear to be UFOs. It's a really interesting kind of book, but myself personally, I don't believe in UFOs. There's another book that was out that was in the 70s or early 80s, that made the correlation between UFOs and demons. That there are UFOs, but they are actually demonic. So, that's an interesting way of approaching it, but that's not my deal either. What Ezekiel saw was a vision from heaven representing angelic beings in God's presence amongst the people. And so anyway, there's a lot of visions throughout the book of Ezekiel. My goal is not necessarily to talk about the visions, but kind of talk about the overview of what's going on here. One of the classic things in the book of Ezekiel is the fact that Ezekiel has the opportunity of coming back to Jerusalem in visions and witnessing for himself the corruption that's going on. And so I want you to take your Bibles and go with me, if you please, to Ezekiel let's go to chapter 10. Ezekiel chapter 10. And let's see here. And, yes, as soon as I get over there. Here we go. Okay, I'm sorry. Chapter 10 is next. Chapter 8 is where I want you to go, if you please. Ezekiel chapter 8. Now, what you see in chapter 8 is a vision. And this, it says in verse number 8, "And it came to pass in the 6th year, the 6th month, and the 5th day of the month, that I sat in my house, and the elders of Judah sat before me, that the hand of the Lord fell upon me. Then I beheld, and lo, the likeness as the appearance of fire, and the appearance of his loins even downward, of fire, and from his loins even upward the appearance of brightness." In chapter 8. "And he put forth the form of a hand, and took me by the lock of my head, and the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heaven, and brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the inner gate that looketh towards the north. There was a seat of the image of jealousy, which provoketh jealousy." Let me just stop right there. So, okay. This is the Christmas season, and I'm sure sometime during this month you're going to watch the Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens, Ebenezer Scrooge thing. You've got to watch it. With my favorite, I've got to say, my favorite version of this is the one that's the Muppet Christmas Carol. That's got to be the most classic one. I've already seen it once. I'll probably watch it again before the end of the Christmas season. But I bring that up only because if you know the story, here's Ebenezer Scrooge, being taken by these ghosts of Christmas past and Christmas present, and taken in flight to see these visions. Okay, so when I read this, I'm sorry to say, I know it's really theological, real spiritual of me to say that, but that's what my mind goes to, an event like that. So it seems to me that the angel's coming down, grabbing him by the hair, taking him to Jerusalem, but he does call it a vision. And so we see this here. So he's in Jerusalem in this vision, and he witnesses a couple events. I want to mention about them, and I want you to, these, you see, if you got your notes there, it would be the, let's see here, chapter 8. Yeah, see that right at the top there it says the view of the temple, chapter 8 through 11, and it says the glory of God departed. And so we're gonna park there for just a few minutes, all right? So what you're going to, these numbers are important. 70 and 25, okay? So two of the things that Ezekiel sees, if you look at verse number 7, "He brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall. Then said he unto me, Son of man, dig now in the wall, and when thou had dug into the wall, behold the door." He goes in, he digs the wall, he looks inside, he sees all kinds of abominations that are going on there. And look at verse number 11. You see verse number 11? "There stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, and in the midst of them stood Jezaniah the son of Shaphan, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up." And of course, what they're doing is they're worshiping false gods here in this temple. All right, so what's the significance of the 70? We get this number of 70 men. Any guesses? Any thoughts? So if you were to read this and it says 70 men of the ancients, What does that mean to you? What does it mean? Who are the 70? Sir?
Is it the Sanhedrin?
The Sanhedrin. Now, the Sanhedrin is a first century establishment. So we're going to, and you're going in the right direction. Okay. So the Sanhedrin that Stephen mentioned about. Now, if you go in the New Testament, you're not going to see, I don't believe you see the word Sanhedrin in the New Testament. What you see is the word council. The council. So Jesus talks about the council. In some of his Proverbs, he mentions about the council. And so it's a New Testament term, the council. As a matter of fact, the Greek word for council happens to be excellent. That's actually the Greek word, and it's translated the council all throughout the New Testament. The term Sanhedrin means steadfastness. It was, in the New, we're talking about first century, it was the Jewish equivalent to the ruling governing body. So it was more of the political side of it. It was the legislative side of the ruling powers of Israel. Now they had 70 people on the Sanhedrin. Where did that come from? Where did this idea of 70 people on the Sanhedrin come from? Did they just kind of pull it out of the hat and said, we need a number. Give me a number. Where did it come from? Anybody remember? All right, let's take your Bibles. Go back with me to Numbers chapter 11. We'll start there. Numbers chapter 11. And Derek, when you get there, would you read verse number 16 and 17?
And the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men.
How many?
70.
That's amazing. Go ahead.
70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone.
Okay, and so what we see here is this is the transitions during the Exodus. They're in the wilderness, and this transition of power that's centered around Moses is now being distributed to others. Because eventually Moses is going off the scene. Joshua is going to take over a role of leadership, but the general leadership of the people, as God says, I'm going to give them, this power is going to be transferred to these 70 men. This is something that the children of Israel are going to do throughout the duration of their time in the Holy Land. And so this group of 70. There's another reference, and just if you would just write down Exodus chapter, I got it written down here somewhere. Exodus chapter 24, you'll see the 70 men mentioned there also. And so this was a common thing for the nation of Israel. So when he goes in and he looks and he sees these 70 men worshiping false gods, that is an indication of the political leadership of the nation of Israel being corrupt. So that's one of the part of the vision that he sees there in the temple. Now, if you would, back in Ezekiel chapter 8, I told you there was we got 70. Now we got 25. I'm going to start verse number 15. We're going down through 15 and 16. This is Ezekiel 8. Then said he unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again. Thou shalt see a greater abomination than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, the door of the temple of the Lord between the porch and the altar. There were 25 men with their backs towards the temple of the Lord, and their faces towards the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. Okay, so get the idea of the temple, the layout of the temple. The temple actually faced east. The front door would have faced east, but the Holy of Holies would have been to the western part of the temple, That's where the Ark of the Covenant is, the altar of incense right in front of it, the veil is right there, table of showbread and the candlestick, they're all right here. When the priest would have been doing their function in the priesthood, which direction would they be facing?
West.
Yes, very good. You're sharp that way there. And so, in their operation of the priesthood, they're always facing to the west. And here they are with their backs turned, facing the east, and worshiping the sun. But we got 25. So, any thoughts? We got the 70, which is the kind of the political leadership of the nation of Israel. So, who are the 25? Any thoughts about the 25? Spiritual leadership. Is that in your notes there? It might be. I don't even know. It is the spiritual leadership. How does it represent the spiritual leadership? How do the 25 represent spiritual leadership? Thoughts about that? Thoughts? Okay, I'll give you a hint. So 25 minus 1 is? Okay, any thoughts, any significance of 24? All right, so let's go back to I got too many notes written down in too many different places, and so it's First Chronicles chapter 24. 1 Chronicles chapter 24. And if you go back there, 1 Chronicles 24, you will see this is, now, just be reminded of the fact that David did not build the temple, Solomon did. David did a lot of pre-work, okay? He was the one who kind of designed the temple, also designed the worship system. And part of that design is found here in 1 Chronicles chapter 24. And these are the divisions of the sons of Aaron. And it begins to go down this long discussion of the sons of Aaron and how they're broken up. And then it begins to talk about this division of the people, of the priesthood. Starting in verse number 7, the first lot. Let me see. Came forth, and I'm not gonna read these names because I'll butcher them. Starting in verse number 7, 8, 9, 10. You see all these on the 17th and 19th, and it goes on and on and on. We get down to verse number 18, the 3 and 20th, and then the 4 and 20th to Mazaziah. These are the orders in the service to come into the house of the Lord according to their manner under Aaron their father, the Lord, as the Lord God of Israel commanded him. Okay, 24 is the number of courses of the priesthood. So what that meant was that each of these family groups of the priesthood had different time slots or times when they were responsible. So this is not like, you got 24 different jobs. You've got 24 different groups of priests that, so you got 12 months, even the Jews had 12 months. You had 12 months in a year, so every twice a month, there'd be a different group in there. So everybody's got like 2 weeks. So you get 2 weeks of work and then you're off for the rest of the year. It's a pretty good gig, if you're a priest, I suppose. But they rotated this course. I mean, we know, like in the New Testament, you see, John the Baptist and his dad, Zacharias, he is of the course of Abiah. What does that mean? That when that family group is responsible for the temple, that's when he would go and he'd be burning the incense, okay? So there's 24 courses, so that is these groups. So 24 represented the priesthood, spiritual leadership. So the 70 represented the secular, or the leadership politically, and this represented the spiritual leadership, secular leadership, spiritual leadership. All right, so we got a number. We got 24, and then we got one guy left. Who's the one guy? We gotta get 25 because it says, right?
The high priest.
There's not a 25th course.
The high priest.
Bingo! So the high priest was not numbered within the course. The high priest was chosen, the lineage of Aaron, and he was selected. The selection of the high priest is going to get worse and worse and worse and become more and more political, and more appointed than a descendant. But the high priest is that 25th, and so what we have with the 25 is the complete the fact that the entirety of the spiritual leadership of the nation of Israel is now corrupt, and the entirety of the secular political leadership of the nation of Israel is corrupt. So the 70, of course, representing the New Testament term Sanhedrin, or the spiritual leadership. The 25 representing the spiritual leadership of the nation of Israel. So this is part of the visions that Jeremiah sees, and so we got both, right? Secular and spiritual, and so what he sees is this complete corruption of the nation of Israel, and so now, and that's of course chapter 8, and then we get into chapter 9 and 10 of the book of Ezekiel, because now something is going to happen. Because here's Ezekiel, he's in a vision, he's at the temple, and he's going to see some things. And one of the things that he sees is God is going to start to judge. And he's going to God's going to be talking about this need to bring destruction. Because of this corruption, God is going to bring destruction. Look at verse number 3. I'm in chapter 9, verse number 3. And the glory of the Lord of Israel was gone up from the cherubs, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house, and he called to the man clothed in white linen, which had a writing inkhorn by his side. He's going to talk about, and look at verse number 7. This is what God says. And he said unto them, defile the house, and fill the courts with the slain. Go ye forth. So God is issuing this command to go and to defile the house of God. So this defilement of the house of God is going to happen, but something has to happen first, and that is the removal of the glory of the Lord from the temple. So there is a progression here that I want you to notice in particular. And that statement's in chapter 9. Please notice chapter 10. And I have that written down. It's in your notes there on page number 8. And it says the glory of God departed. And you'll see 3 particular steps. I just read verse number 3. If you look at 10:4, it says the glory of the Lord went up from the cherub, and stood upon the threshold of the house. And the house was filled with cloud, and the court was full of the brightness of the Lord's glory. Now, I just want to mention this. Now, we see the term cherub. Now, in the vision here, Ezekiel's seeing actual cherubs coming down. Okay, but where else do we see cherubs in the temple? Where do we see cherubs at? There's a lot of engravings and things like that. But where are the cherubs? Yes, sir.
The Ark.
On the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant is a box, and in the Ark of the Covenant is the law. Moses had the tablets. He put them in there. Of course, bowl of manna is in there. The rod that Joshua had that budded. I'm sorry, not Joshua. Aaron's rod that budded. It's in there also. And so that is in the temple. On top of the Ark of the Covenant is what's called the mercy seat, and that is actually just a lid. It's got a border around it, a little raised border. That way, if you have a coffee cup sitting on it, it won't slide off because it's got a border on it. Okay, so that's almost mockery. That's blasphemous. I guess I should stop that. And so, but on the top of that, there's also these carvings, gold, of the angels, and their wings are spread out like this on both sides. And then when that's on the mercy seat itself, and then when Solomon, of course, had the temple built they not only do we have the cherubims on the ark, but they also, Solomon had other cherubs made who actually kind of stood on each side of the ark, and their wings even overshadowed that. And so they would have been massive. So now those cherubs were there, but we also see the vision that Ezekiel's having, and he's having these visions, and there's actually cherubs coming. And so at this point, the glory of the Lord is lifting up from this place where it's at, and stood on the threshold of the house. And so it is very likely what they're speaking about here is that the glory of the Lord would have been at the Ark of the Covenant. And that's where, of course, the main part of the worship for the nation of Israel would have been at the Ark of the Covenant. That's where the blood was sprinkled during the Day of Atonement. Played a key role, of course, in all of the Exodus. And now that glory is removed from that to the threshold of the house. And so what would have been, from the Holy of Holies, and then to where the temple itself was divided into the Holy of Holies, the holy place, and that's where the table was at, and that's where the candlestick was at, and the altar of incense, and then the court, and that's where the basin was at for washings, and the altar, the brazen altar where the sacrifices were made. So it's likely, when he's talking about threshold, it's likely that he's talking about all the way out to the outer part of that court. And so this is the glory of the Lord. Now, as I read this account, that more than likely at this point, the Ark of the Covenant is still in the temple. Because the glory of the Lord is still there. So it's more than likely it's not. It has not disappeared yet. So the Ark of the Covenant is there. The glory moves from there. And you'll see in your notes there, verse number 18, then the glory of the Lord departed from off the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubim. And so that drops all the way down. That's verse number 18 and verse number 19. The cherubim lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight. When they went out, the wheels, and there's that very similar to the first vision he sees in chapter 1 with the wheels in the middle of the wheels, right? They also beside them, and every one of them stood at the door of the east gate and of the Lord's house, and the glory of the Lord of Israel was over them. So we go from the threshold to the eastern gate. Now, the eastern gate is actually that's the city walls. If you go to Israel today, you go to Jerusalem today, they have rebuilt the city walls, of course, after the Babylonian destruction, and of course, then even after that, of course, the Romans destroyed the city again. But the walls of Jerusalem have been rebuilt, and you can actually stand on the Temple Mount. There's a mosque there now, of course, that Golden Dome Mosque, and you can look and you can see the Eastern Gate. It's still there. It's blocked up. It's actually there's no gate there anymore. It's solid. They put blocks in there and things, and you can't get through it. Matter of fact, on the other side of the Eastern Gate, there is a cemetery. The Muslims have a cemetery there, and their theory is that the Messiah can't come through that Eastern Gate because he wouldn't be able to cross the cemetery. That's great logic right there. But the Muslims literally have a cemetery outside of the Eastern Gate. What's interesting is if you go down the hill, that's the Kidron Valley's right there. The brook goes through there. Gehenna's down Gehenna's down that way. But you go down there and you cross over the Kidron Valley and the creek. You go up there and there's a Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives that all across there. And the Jews have buried people there for hundreds and hundreds of years. But it faces the Temple Mount. Beautiful view from up there. There's actually like a 5-star hotel at the top of the mountain there. Beautiful view of the city, but you're right there on the Jewish cemetery side of it. So the glory of God raises off of the Ark of the Covenant and goes to the door, the threshold, and then from the door goes out to the eastern gate. And at that time, the eastern gate would have been used. They would have gone in and out of there. That would have been the main entrance for worship. There were other entrances. There was the dung gate was down this way, which often referred to as the Jericho gate would have been that way. That's where the deacon Stephen, he was killed at that gate. So there were many entrances, but the eastern gate was the main entrance to come to the temple. What a beautiful sight that would have been, especially in the morning when the sun's coming up over the Mount of Olives and those doors are open. That sun would have shone right into the temple. All that gold would have just lit right up. What a beautiful sight that would have been. So there's the glory of the Lord. Please notice chapter 11, 22. Then did the cherubims lift up their wings, and the wheels beside them, and the glory of God of Israel was over them above, and the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city, and stood upon the mountain, which is on the east side of the city. So here at this point, they go from the eastern gate to the Mount of Olives, and then it's gone. At that point, we see no other reference. So what we have here is God taking his glory out of the temple. Why is God going to take his glory out of the temple? Any thoughts? Why is God taking his glory out of the temple? So it can be defiled. It's going to be destroyed. God knows it. He's already said it's going to happen. And so he takes his glory out of the temple itself. Now, in reference to the temple itself, a lot of that stuff is going to be taken by Nebuchadnezzar. The Bible talks about it. Matter of fact, you're in and we'll be in the book of Daniel next week. But in the book of Daniel, you see Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar, and he's having that drunken party, and they're using the vessels that came out of the temple. And so a lot of the things that were in the temple are going to be taken. Some of them are listed directly in the scriptures, but you never see the Ark of the Covenant ever again. As a matter of fact, you fast forward, several centuries when of course the Babylonian captivity eventually ends. The children of Israel come back. They rebuild the temple. Worship starts up again. The temple is going to be destroyed again by the Romans. And you can go to Rome today, and you can see the Ark of Triumph that was built in honor of the General Titus, who became an emperor of Rome. General Titus, who had the temple destroyed. And you can go there today and see that in Rome. And there are reliefs on there of the Romans carrying out all this stuff from the temple. You see the menorah, you can see different vessels and things like that, but you don't see the Ark of the Covenant. So there's no record of the Ark of the Covenant from that time, and I believe this reference in Ezekiel is the last reference. I know it's vague, but the glory of God's still there, and now it's gone. So it would be the last reference of the Ark of the Covenant. So here's the question. You answer this question, you get an A. Where's the Ark of the Covenant today? That is the $6 million question. Any guesses? Any thoughts? No, it's not in a warehouse in Washington, D.C. Okay, you were thinking that, I could tell. Yeah. Now, where were the Ark? What are some of the theories that are out there as far as the Ark of the Covenant? Donde is the Ark of the Covenant? Yes, sir.
They say they have it somewhere in Ethiopia, right?
Yes, they do say that they have it somewhere in Ethiopia. And matter of fact, there is a church there in Ethiopia with an order of priesthood that guard the Ark of the Covenant night and day, and have been for centuries. And so now how it got there is the interesting question. So you all know the story of the Queen of Sheba. She came to visit Solomon, and it's recorded in the scriptures for us. Okay, this is how the story goes. That Solomon and the Queen of Sheba had a child, Melech the First. And Melech the First, of course, when the Queen of Sheba goes back to Ethiopia, the child is born and is raised, and is told, your dad is Solomon. And so eventually Melech the First goes back to Jerusalem to visit dad. Now here's where it gets a little murky, because some people say, some of the theories are, the accounts are, that Melech the First stole the Ark of the Covenant and took it back with him. Others say that Solomon actually gave the Ark of the Covenant to Melech the First, almost like a gift, like, you are the official line, you're the lineage of the kingship from God. It's like you're the chosen one. And so Melech the First was given it. Either way, they believe that the Ark of the Covenant was given to Melech the First, or he took it back to Ethiopia. You can go there today, and there is in a city, there is it's not a church. I mean, it's like almost like a fortress, but it's being guarded by an order of priests who claim that the Ark of the Covenant's in that building. So there it is. I will say this, that there has been a line of kings from the time of Melech the First all the way up through the 1970s, an unbroken line of kings in Ethiopia, up to Haile Selassie. You do your math, that's a long time. And there is, many people believe that Haile Selassie was the Messiah. If you've ever heard of the group called the Rastafarians, never heard of them? Most people only associate them with dreadlocks and smoking dope. Smoking marijuana was a part of their worship there in Jamaica. But the Rastafarians believed that Haile Selassie was the Messiah. And then they would hold to the fact that the Ark of the Covenant's there. They are if you've ever heard the term replacement theology, that's where that belief that the nation of Israel has been replaced with another group. They are replacement theologists and believe that the Ethiopian people are the descendants of Solomon and that they are the true heirs for the promises of the nation of Israel. Okay, so that still goes on today, and so it's believed that way. So the Ark of the Covenant could be in Ethiopia, or if you are familiar with the Apocrypha, what's the Apocrypha? Anybody know what the Apocrypha is? What's the Apocrypha? I make no assumptions that people know. What's the Apocrypha? Not the Apocalypse. We all know that's associated with the zombies, but no. What's the Apocrypha? Haley Elizabeth, do you know what the Apocrypha is? Not really. Very good. It's the books between the Old and New Testament. Now, we don't have it in our Bible. It used to be, matter of fact, the original King James Bible, 1611, had the Apocrypha actually in it. There was a notation that was not considered to be scripture. It was there more for historical content. So there's some interesting things in the Apocrypha. The first and second Maccabees is probably one of the most interesting things in the Apocrypha. If you'd like to read that, it's a historical account of the period of time, intertestamental period of time. And that's when the Seleucids took over Israel. After Alexander the Great died, his kingdom was divided up into 4 parts. The Seleucids ran that section that we would call Israel today, plus a lot of other territory. One of the Seleucid kings eventually is going to be Antiochus Epiphanes, and he's going to desecrate the temple, and the Jews are going to have a fit, and there's going to be a revolt driven by is it Jacob? Anyway, Maccabeus. And the Maccabean revolt is going to end the Seleucid Empire, and the Jews are going to get the temple back, and we celebrate Hanukkah today just because of it, okay? All this great stuff happens, all right? So, that's all found in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. So 2nd Maccabees are in the Apocrypha, as well as Bel and the Dragon. You want an interesting story? Bel and the Dragon is a good fairy tale for you. Daniel, the prophet Daniel, is mentioned in Bel and the Dragon. He's the good guy, settles everything. Anyway, So in the Apocrypha, I'm not sure if it's first or second Maccabees, one of the Maccabees is an account on the location of the Ark of the Covenant. It will tell you that the Ark of the Covenant was carried by the priest into the land of Moab and buried in the mountain where Moses died. And he viewed the promised land, and he died in the mountain there. So it records there in Maccabees that that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. It's in a cave in that mountain where Moses had viewed the Holy Land and died. So that's where it's at. So you can now I throw this out there. We were just talking about the temple, Holy of Holies, Eastern Gate, nice straight line. Okay. If you draw a straight line from the Holy of Holies through the Eastern Gate, it will actually, that line goes right to that mountain that Moses viewed, Mount Pisgah. And from Mount Pisgah's lofty height, I viewed my home and took my flight. Great song. But you draw a straight line. So if you want, it sounds like a field trip, right? A school field trip. We go, it's the country of Jordan today, and they're very accessible for all of us. You can get in there really easy. So we just need to get the maps out, draw the line, take a trip, and go over there and start digging on Mount Pisgah until we find the Ark of the Covenant. So I think that sounds like a great trip, doesn't it? So that's another theory. There's other theories about the Ark of the Covenant. If you're at the end of the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah is actually taken and kidnapped and taken into Egypt. There are some people that believe that Jeremiah took the Ark of the Covenant with him when he was kidnapped and taken into Egypt, and that the Ark of the Covenant is buried somewhere in Egypt, and Jeremiah did that. And of course, then there's just a real blame theory that it's in a cave underneath the Temple Mount, waiting to be discovered. So I kind of opt for that. It doesn't sound as dramatic as the other ones, but it sure would make a lot of sense. There's also the belief that the Ark of the Covenant was actually extracted by God and taken into heaven. And I do want to remind you that the book of Revelation, I think it's Revelation chapter 11, does talk about a temple. Matter of fact, we're going to talk about temples here in just a minute. Talked about the temple in heaven and the Ark of the Covenant there. So whether that's a spiritual representation of physical things on this earth, or the actual Ark of the Covenant is up in heaven, that's a possibility. But anyway, the glory is departed, and the purpose for the glory being departed, taken off the Ark of the Covenant and taken out, is so that the temple can be destroyed. All right. So we're going to take a short break and get back to the book of Ezekiel here in about 5 or 6 minutes. All right. Thank you very much. Everybody got your 70s and your 25s? I'm going to erase it.